Now let's go ahead and do our 5.3, approve continuation of an emergency declaration for drought conditions, and I believe this was pulled by Supervisor Green.
Yeah, thank you. I think we were anticipating get a staff report on this next month, but I did receive a request that we accept some public comment on this, and also, as long as we're going to do that, I wanted to make sure that if we are going to have a later staff presentation, we give clear direction that it just be related to the existence or the non-existence of a drought emergency as listed in this proclamation, not precluding any longer-term discussions about drought preparedness or what have you, but this is an emergency proclamation that dates back 3 years. The governor's office rescinded most of its drought emergency regulations a year ago by means of Executive Order N-5-23, signed March 24th, 2023. And Johanna, I have a small PDF, if you can pull that up. It's only about 3 slides. So it's hard to prove a negative, but the best place I looked for last night was from our own website, drought.gov. Next slide, please. All right, so the drought monitor conditions, you can see on that there is a small band of yellow on the east side of the Sierra Slope that has abnormally dry conditions. That's nothing resembling a drought. And within Lake County proper, there's nothing indicating that there's any type of drought or pre-drought conditions currently in Lake County. And the data set on this is about a week old. I believe February 27th is this data. Next slide, please. 30-day precip shows we're either at normal or slightly above normal throughout the county. And that data set is as of the 5th, I believe, of March. And next slide. And this shows a 30-day temperature mean, showing we're either exactly at normal for the historical average over the last 30 years or 1 to 3 degrees warmer. So that's our own state's drought monitoring mechanism. It shows no state of drought presently in Lake County, and so for the purpose of our emergency proclamation, although it was important 3 years ago to get on board and pass that proclamation, and definitely some stuff happened premised on that emergency proclamation 3 years ago that may or may not deserve a fresh look. I'm going to suggest, next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. And also the lake is pretty darn full. I think we're at 8 or just over 8. This was Sunday during the bass tournament. You'll see a little bit of snow on the mountains, full lake, plenty of happy bass fishermen. Doesn't really meet drought conditions to me. So although we can wait for a staff presentation next month, if this board so desires, next slide, please. My suggestion would be let's just call it good. There's no drought as far as the state's concerned, and I don't think there's any drought as far as our local communities should be concerned. And that's it. And I'll leave it at that for now. If there's any public comment, this would be a good time for it.
Just a quick question. Would you like to express some of the statements that were shared from our water resources?
Just that they've been working hard with flooding and other things right now. If there is any clarity, I believe the last communication I had from Mr. De Leon was anticipating a broader presentation on all things drought. I think it should be narrowly focused to whether we continue passing this emergency proclamation every 30 days. Again, I'm very interested in hearing things about drought preparedness. There may be things we need to do for our climate resiliency action plan that does involve some actions that this board may take for a more permanent regulation, but what I'd like to do is get us off the emergency footing. So I don't know if Mr. De Leon is available to clarify his comments, but I know Sheriff Howe is in training, and OES didn't really have anything to offer today.
So I'm just going to paraphrase what was in the email, that there are potential funding sources that are still applied based on the drought situation in the sense of preparation for future droughts, but yet still utilizing the emergency drought declaration. mention that continuing to seek funding, including, I believe, what we signed to move forward with for Lake Pillsbury with the Department of Water Resources. That was a drought-related grant that we are looking to obtain. I think we just submitted the application. I don't know that it's been approved yet, but so just wanted to at least iterate some of the comments made by Water Resources that there are things still linked to the drought in the sense of funding, possibly reimbursement based on the work that has to be done that we've been requested to do. And definitely, I mean, you look at some of the other proclamations, we have the snowstorm from 2023. The snowstorm from 2023 is over, but it's a matter of keeping things open. Cal OES tells us to keep it open in order for access to funds or reimbursement to be able to occur. So I just want to make that clear, both to all of us and to the general public, that just because we have a declared emergency that continues, that doesn't mean that the actual imminent emergency itself is still occurring. It means that we are still in the midst of reimbursement, getting grants, and working on future resiliency for the county. So I'll stop there and see if there's any other comments from board members.
Oh, I was going to say the same thing. We have several emergencies that we have to keep going even though the event is over, like the low-level snow and winter storms. And it can be confusing to people that we have funding and we have projects and we have things that are ongoing. That is the reason why we need to keep this open. And until we have all of our staff completely vet all of the things that we're looking for, we need to keep this here, including the tree mortality disaster, because we haven't even yet started that work. And that relies on CDA funding that is tied to drought. So without a presentation from OES and Water Resources and understanding, everything that touches this emergency and the ramifications for ending it, I don't have any interest in not approving this again today.
And you mentioned the tree mortality, and I believe, I'm looking right now at the Hitch emergency that says existence of a local emergency due to persistent drought, and so maybe there would be impact on that emergency as well if there was a termination of the drought emergency. Just things are connected, maybe not as directly as it seems, but it would be something that I would like to know. What would that impact be if this was terminated? Any other comments? Supervisor Green?
Well, I understand fully what you're talking about. This is not like a wildfire where we're sucking a bunch of FEMA funds out in direct relief. Even with the proclamation being supportive of some ongoing requests for funding, those efforts can't be in and of themselves the justification for the drought proclamation. The conditions for drought either exist or they don't. And if you were to say, amend it to say, for the time period up till now, it's a drought and we fully reserve every right to get any funding recap we can out of that. But just letting emergency proclamations ride for 3 years on end in the middle of flooding, I don't need a lot of additional input from staff necessarily, because I don't think if we rescind the emergency proc today, that is in any way going to hamper any of those funding efforts that you're talking about. Now, if you want to hear chapter and verse from staff, I get it, but we're also burdening staff by asking them to do that. So I'll just leave it at that.
Go for it.
I mean, I feel like that's your perception, but there's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot of projects on the line. And we need to be very sure how we move forward. We can't jeopardize any of these projects, including the tree project that we've been working on for 3 years. So there is a lot here. In all of these disasters, the event ends, and there's still things that carry on. And it might seem annoying to you, but this is, how we have to move forward.
Any further comments or questions? I'm going to open it up for public comment. Please come on up to the microphone. You have 3 minutes.
I'm Joan Moss. I live in Lake County. I agree with Mr. Green that on the surface, it looks like there's no more drought. But underneath is all the money that's supporting the repairs that occurred during the drought. And there are still things that need to be done to recover from the drought. And Jessica, Bruna, everybody, you really said it. There's ongoing projects due to what happened at the drought that need to be finished. And that's why the effects of the emergency are still an emergency. Thank you. I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in. You have to look at all sides of the coin, but you do have to explain it. And I agree that it's not a consent agenda item. It's a public relations item. That this happened because of the drought, and the funding is still coming, and it's still due. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Please come on up.
A little bit taller than Joan. Rebecca Harper, Lake County Farm Bureau. I'd like to start out by saying I don't find it confusing, and I also don't feel that this is the way we have to move forward. I agree with Michael, and I understand that there's potential funding sources available, but I'm kind of tired of hearing there are potential funding sources available without hearing what exactly those funding sources are. That sounds like we're not necessarily doing our due diligence or our research, but more of an excuse to keep this going. And if there are funding sources that rely on this, I'd like to hear what are they, what stage are they in, or are we just saying, you know, there's potential funding sources related to this. I don't know. I think that's a bit of a scapegoat. Clearly, we're not in emergency drought conditions, and of course, I agree that funding is important. If we can get extra funding into the community, obviously that's a positive impact of this proclamation, but there are also negative impacts that we don't necessarily talk about. One of those being increased permitting requirements for some folks related to drought conditions. Another one of those being jurisdictional changes in how we look at water use, which is currently impacting our community, and not necessarily rightfully so. So I think those things need to be considered as well. Does potential, not currently existing, does potential funding outweigh negative impacts that continuing this drought emergency proclamation has? I don't know, but I would like to see this proclamation ended. I think we're not currently in a state of drought, and if we haven't been able to secure funding from this proclamation in the last 3 years, when will we be able to? Will we be able to at all? I'm not sure, but I think there needs to be a more definitive presentation on what those impacts are if that's going to be the excuse for continuing the proclamation. Otherwise, if we're not able to do that, and we haven't been able to do that for the last few continuances, then I don't see any need to continue the proclamation further.
Appreciate the comment, and there has been a plan on our April meeting. I don't know if it's the first week of April, but I believe it's supposed to be the first week of April, that there will be a presentation to describe some of these connections, and then at that point making a full-blown decision whether to terminate or continue based on that information.
Yeah.
So we are moving forward to have those conversations so we can make sure it's needed or not needed, but we're making sure to give staff time to be able to put all that together and be able to bring that to us.
Yeah, I understand. I guess the issue is we really haven't been in a drought since last winter. So we've been saying there's potential funding for over the past year and haven't had that presentation yet. So April's great. It'll come soon enough. But I just think we aren't experiencing drought conditions. If you live on the other side of the lake, you can drive by and see lots of property damage occurring due to flooding conditions. So it's just a little bit concerning to me that we have both of those things going on and no real quantitative evaluation on if we've had funding or what that potential impact has been, and we're still putting that off another month when we've been out of drought emergency conditions for over a year.
And I'll add on top of this presentation that we are expecting and that we've asked for, we need to see how it will affect other proclamations. Like I mentioned, the tree mortality. We made that emergency in 2022. And we still have not received funding for that project. And that is the tens of millions of dollars to get those dead trees down out of our county right-of-ways. And so that is something that we've been working on, and it is slow. It is a slow, hard process. And so just ending the drought proclamation today could have effects on that without us taking a look at how they're connected. And when we do have this presentation in March, we can evaluate how can we maybe change the proclamations so that no work will, so that we don't have any problems going forward, we don't have any work halted or lose those funding opportunities. So that is just one of the major funding opportunities that I've been working on for 3 years. And I cannot let anything happen to that until we have this comprehensive conversation and figure out all of our different emergencies and how they're connected. And so that's why I'm very firm on this today.
Yeah, I understand. And like I said, I don't want to see us lose out on any potential funding. Maybe the answer is restructuring the way that the proclamations are written, but I think we've been moving towards analyzing things on a scientific basis, especially when it comes to endangered species in our area. So to see the scientific basis for drought conditions ignored for monetary conditions is really frustrating. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. I'm going to pause at this moment in time. We seem to have some technical issues, and I want to make sure that if there's further comments or deliberations on this, that it's heard by the public. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Do we need it to be 10? Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So we will come back at 9:53 so that we can make sure everyone's hearing this conversation. Thank you for your patience. We've resolved our technical difficulties. We are going to continue our public comment, and I know there's a repeat for public comment, but want to make sure that everyone gets heard at least their first time prior to doing repeats. Anyone else have a comment on this item? Seeing none, Joan, if you want to come back up and give your brief statement.
Joan Moss. I want to comment that the ordinance says drought conditions. It doesn't say continuation of emergency declaration for drought conditions. It doesn't say for drought. It means that the conditions caused by the drought still exist and have not been solved, and it's meritorious to apply for funding to help for them. We're not saying there's still a drought. We're saying that there's still drought conditions that need financial aid from various agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board. Did we have Director De Leon that wanted to speak on this or make a comment?
Good morning, board. Scott De Leon. No, I don't really have anything else to add. The email that I sent out yesterday with the comments about the potential for funding, you read most of it. The department will have a presentation later next month, and I think it's premature to end the proclamation at this point, but that's just my opinion. And we'll do whatever the board chooses to do. That's about all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Pyska?
Yes, Scott, who's taking the lead on that presentation? Is it Water Resources? Because it seems like the conversation should include admin and the auditor's office too, and OES, make sure that we're not going to miss anything.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we asked for the time that we asked for. It's not a simple presentation because you're right. All of those departments and other outside agencies are going to need to be involved. I see Director Turner has her name. I think it also applies to things in community development. So it's it's a complicated report. And so, I would anticipate all the agencies that you just mentioned, and perhaps more, will have some part of that presentation or something to add to that presentation.
And then given Rebecca Harper's comments about impacts to fees, I think that's an important piece of information to also look at so that we can see how this is impacting the agriculture community and other people, other folks in the community. So would that be?
Well, that's the first I've heard of that, and perhaps Ms. Harper would like to come up or get a hold of me and share some of those impacts. And we can certainly try to address those in the presentation.
Okay, sorry. Did you say that's CDD?
Yeah, it's not necessarily fees, it's increased permitting.
I'm sorry.
Can you come up to the microphone? Sure. Sorry.
No,
Yeah, so I was talking about like permit application requirements that are related to drought, such as hydrology studies and other drought-based permitting requirements, not necessarily fees. There may be additional fees that exist, but that isn't necessarily what I was referencing. And I believe most of those would be within CDD, some of which apply to cannabis. I'm not sure, but I know some do apply to cannabis as well.
There was an urgency ordinance for hydrology reports to be provided. That was in the midst of the drought as well, and that is still
Existing. right,
in
yeah.
existence and would disappear upon the release of the drought emergency.
Okay, cool. So, and then the other thing that I was referencing was jurisdictional changes. So, for example, State Water Resource Control Board does not have authority over groundwater unless emergency drought conditions exist. So we're one of 2 counties declared by the state that has emergency drought conditions still existing. I believe the rightful end of this proclamation may help alleviate some of that. So again, emergency drought conditions constitute some other agencies, specifically state agencies, having authority over water uses that they do not regularly have authority over. So that's the real foundation of why this is so important. If there is not a true emergency drought, then the proclamation should be ended, and maybe we can find some auxiliary way to keep potential funding sources alive. But those state agencies that regulate based off of emergency authority, they don't look at the proclamation and say, oh, well, they're just looking for funding and ignore it and, go about their regular jurisdiction. So I think that's really important as well. And that's it.
Thank you. We have Director Turner from CDD, Community Development Department.
Thank you. Yes, I think it would be appropriate for community development to also join in the report with Water Resources and Public Works. As the chair has stated, there are a couple ordinances that do link the drought to hydrology studies. However, if that declaration was removed, the department still has full authority to request the studies that it sees appropriate. And so I think that does warrant further discussion. Supervisor Green and I have been chatting about that lately. I think it would help for us to join Water Resources in that report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Supervisor Green?
Yeah, just to be clear, I appreciate staff's willingness to bring it back. So again, not opposed in any way to taking prudent and reasonable actions related to drought resiliency, climate change, adaptability, whatever you want to call it. But those things fall short of the emergency. So in 2021, we declared a drought emergency. On top of that, we did, premised on the then state of drought emergency declared at the local level, we passed a couple of local ordinances that continue to have impacts based on the premise that a drought emergency exists. And it's not self-executing. Those ordinances aren't going to fall away just because we end the drought proclamation. So I just think when we do come back, it is going to be important not just to connect the dots on any potential funding streams that you think this drought emergency proclamation is still delivering, but also to educate ourselves and staff and the general public about what buckets of money that are out there that don't require an emergency proclamation to tap into. And it seems like in this growing emphasis on climate adaptability, some of those buckets of money are where we should be focusing our efforts on, as opposed to trying to pin the tail on a never-ending drought emergency. But I look forward to the direction the staff we're going to give here today.
So you mentioned in your introduction to this item to clarify what we're looking from staff in order to make our decision. So I'd like to list a couple different items. One, I think we need to look at what grants are we either currently going after or currently have obtained that would be impacted by this. We need to get a yes or no answer, or try to get a yes or no answer. If this goes away, this declared emergency, does it prohibit us from continuing to access funds that we have already been approved for, or does it prohibit us to continue to try and access funds that we're seeking currently for other declared emergencies that we have, such as the tree mortality or the hitch? We need to understand the impacts of the ordinances going away, because there are ways to cancel ordinances or change ordinances, because maybe that's one other way of dealing with the permitting issues. So that's one thing. And what was the last? And also, what's the impact to the declaration of tree mortality and hitch, in the sense that they both speak to drought being part of the reason that it's an emergency? We want to make sure that if this goes away, it doesn't completely cancel out other declared emergencies, since there's no longer that support. So I think those are the questions that I would like to seek answers to. I don't know if there's anything else from board members that would like to add to that.
Well, you mentioned grants and funding opportunities, but we also need to have reimbursements in there too.
True. From our auditor controller's perspective, are we still anticipating? Are we still collecting hours, and so on and so forth? So thank you for that. And
Maybe anyone we're partnering with.
and I don't know that that might need our help with some of that, to make sure we reach out to nonprofits or other groups that are doing that type of work.
Well, they'll probably know and just come, or however.
Yeah. No, we definitely want to make sure that it's not just us financially that we would be impacting. It could be others. Potentially, I'm thinking of groups like Terra or things like that, that some of the work that they do environmentally around the lake and things like that. So definitely a good addition.
So our climate officer could help us with that.
Okay.
And tribal liaison too. We don't know if any of the tribal nations have any grants out there too.
Is there a consensus from the team to request answers to those questions?
Yeah, I think those are all good. I do know there were some inflow projects too that were worked on as far as water. There's a lot of folks that had to extend those types of things. I know maybe Special Districts has any updates that we had here at the county that we were working on during that, so that would be the only thing, but support everything else.
And I'll check with my local water districts, because they had similar drought grants as well to extend their pipeline in the lake.
And you mentioned it earlier, but it's worth mentioning again, anything related to the Pillsbury project.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
It looks like we have consensus for that. And please reach out to us if there's anything that we can do to help get some of these answers. We are connected with some of these nonprofits and other groups as well. Internally, I think we can handle that. But overall, if there's any help, please reach out to a supervisor and see if we can provide some answers.
And timed item when it comes back.
So we will, because of the amount of folks that are interested in it, I think it would probably behoove us to make it a timed item when it comes back in April. So we'll make that happen. Looks like we have consensus for that, but we still have a emergency declaration continuation on the floor.
I move that we approve the continuation of proclamation of emergency declaration for drought conditions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries.